The Prix Galien is a welcome initiative to stimulate creative research and promote excellence. Barack Obama. The Galien Awards ceremony is considered the equivalent of the Oscars night for the innovators in the labs and awards every year the best pharmaceutical product, the best biotechnology product, the best medical technology, and the best digital health product.
This is the right event, on the right issue, at the right time.
I thank His Excellency, the President, for bringing Prix Galien to Africa, and I look forward to the day when we will celebrate an African winner of the Prix Galien.
I'm particularly grateful to receive this award.
The awards are among the highest honors in science and commerce because they lead to improvement in the human condition.
The Prix Galien Awards recognize the world's brightest minds and most innovative companies. They are a true celebration of the hard work required to produce life-changing interventions.
That is what makes us optimistic about the future.
Congratulations to all of you.
Make a difference. Join the Galien Foundation. The Galien Week of Innovation has been made possible thanks to our precious friends and partners who share the Galien Foundation's values. First off, the two exclusive platinum partners are We would now like to acknowledge our two gold partners. Furthermore, we proudly introduce our corporate leaders partners. The associate partners are The grantors are To conclude, we are extremely fortunate to work with outstanding media partners who have contributed to the Galien Foundation's renown.
Hello and welcome to the Week of Innovation webinars here in New York. The objective this week is to provide additional content and background for our largest annual event, the Prix Galien USA Awards, to be held here on Thursday in New York, in conjunction with our annual Galien Forum of Speakers representing top scientific experts and leaders in global health. We've developed this new webinar series to give our nominees for Best Pharmaceutical, Best Biotech, Best MedTech, and Digital Health Products greater visibility in describing their journey of medical discovery. This year's Galien USA Awards has a record 84 nominees for 4 categories from 65 companies, covering 15 diverse therapeutic areas ranging from cancer, cardiology, and neurosciences to infectious and very rare genetic diseases. Clearly, many of these conditions will benefit from digital solutions that help patients manage their symptoms. We'll be looking closely at products in all 4 categories throughout this week. Today, because of large number of nominees, the range of conditions represented by excellence in science, the Galien USA Awards Committee has decided to host a series of 14 webinars prior to the Thursday forum and award ceremony, where the winners in each of these 4 best of categories will be announced. In the best digital health product solutions, which is our focus today, we'll be holding 2 webinars due to the large number of products in this important field, 11. This webinar, in this hour we have allotted, is devoted to 4 nominees covering care and wellness solutions. What we will cover today relates to the central question: are insurers and health systems ready to embrace and reward these new self-care technologies, particularly in recognizing prevention and wellness as an integral part of patient care? Note that the webinar includes some time for audience questions. State that question can be forwarded to the moderator using the link provided on your screen. Before moving to our discussion, let's have a quick poll. What is the most promising new medical advance likely within the next 5 to 10 years? Please vote in this poll, and we will publish the results of the poll at the end of the webcast. Why don't I begin by introducing our 5 nominees? The 5 nominees today are Quinton Soule, Mert Arel, Emma, and Teresa Mcfarland. So why don't I have each of them introduce themselves? Quinton Soule, over to you.
Thanks a lot, and I'm very happy to be there. So my name is Quentin Soule. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Dream. I'm an engineer by training, and I've always been fascinated by the way we can merge technology and medicine to improve healthcare in general. And so you focus on sleep, which is a pathology that touches a lot of people. And well, we merge deep technology and sleep medicine to build new solutions to diagnose and treat patients.
Thank you so much. Matt Arel?
Hi, it's a great pleasure to be here. My name is Matt. I'm the head of R&D and clinical strategy at Huma Therapeutics. Huma is a British health technology company, which has been around for about 10 years now. And what we've been developing over the last 10 years is a unified, interoperable platform that can connect with a whole range of different devices and can enable remote patient monitoring across a variety of different conditions, as well as supporting delivery of decentralized and hybrid clinical trials. So that's kind of what we do at the core of what we do, and on top of that, we have an R&D division that is specifically looking at what kind of insights we can generate out of this real-time continuous sensor data that is feeding in from our various projects and focused on developing and validating digital measures and biomarkers. It's great pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Emma?
Hi, so thank you. Firstly, thank you for having me today. I'm really glad that I can share with you today. So I'm Emma Touré-Cook. I'm the CSO of Ergotech. I'm actually a pharmacist specialized in clinical research. I work for Ergotech, and Ergotech is actually the tech section of a French laboratory, Ergo, specialized in wound healing and consumer healthcare. Ergotech is kind of young startup. We've been there for almost 6 years now, and our focus is to develop and provide devices, connected healthcare devices aimed at improving sleep and wellness. And we are directed for now to the general public. So our goal is to improve sleep health with new technologies, basically. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. Krista?
Hey, hi, everyone. I'm Krista Mcfarland, founder and CEO of Patienttory. Thank you for having me here today. Patienttory is a real-time data analytics and population health engagement platform. We today aggregate data from over 24,000 health systems in the US using blockchain technology. And with that data, we're able to help our users identify potential problem areas where they can improve their health. We also use that data to identify high potential candidates for clinical trials matching.
Thank you so much. And finally, my name is Srivatsan. I'm the Chief Digital Officer for Ikea, and really looking forward to an exciting and interesting panel today. We have really a good set of people here to represent what we could do in this field. So why don't I ask each one, why did your company choose this particular focus area? And if you could talk about a little bit about your product, but what does your technology represent from a therapeutic breakthrough or meeting an unmet need? Why don't I start now with Krista? Why don't you go first, and then we'll come back to that, Krista.
Absolutely. So just a background on me, my background is in healthcare emergent technology. Prior to this, I was with a telemedicine company, and one of our biggest challenges was always gaining access to that patient data. Interoperability of information has always been a challenge in the healthcare industry, and seeing new technologies emerge and made sense to solve for this problem. I wholeheartedly believe that secure data infrastructure is going to help bring about more advanced technologies such as AI, especially when using prediction analytics to help cure, but also prevent chronic diseases, which is why our company has decided on this platform. Also within the integration of other wearable devices such as medical devices and Fitbit and Apple devices that are now coming into the fold.
Fantastic. Next, why don't I ask Emma to describe the same?
So for Ergotech, it's really been the main focus on sleep was really the fact that this is a very largely present trouble in the adult population that is chronic and that is really unmet. You see patients with insomnia that have been insomniac for 10 years, 20 years with no real solution, no long-term solution. And really the aim was to provide a way to get your sleep back, find yourself better. This is also kind of an invisible disease. Is not people do not talk about it so much, and this is what we wanted to do, to bring communication on the problem and to provide a solution that people can basically use themselves to feel more free and so they can take charge of their sleep.
That's fantastic. They say from a research that in actual, doctor education, they only spend about 3 hours on sleep and sleep education, and it's a huge unmet need. Matt, over to you.
Yeah, I mean, we at Huma, we don't necessarily have one specific therapeutic area of focus. We have some specific focus areas, absolutely, but we very much sort of started in rare diseases, and then gradually, as we developed the platform, we expanded into other chronic conditions as well as episodic conditions within the healthcare system. But I think our overall goal and ambition always was, how can we deliver proactive, predictive healthcare, which is something that everybody's been talking about for decades, but it required a certain level of maturation with the devices and the sensors and the smartphones that we have in our pockets, and to be able to access this type of real-world continuous data around various different health metrics, right? Because everything that we've done so far in medicine has always been based on episodic data, right? We go and get our blood test done, we go and have our X-ray and MRI scan, and And with that type of episodic data, you're only getting a snapshot view of the individual. So what we're trying to do is to fill in the gaps, right? And if we can have a picture of that full movie, real-time continuous data feeding in from digital technologies combined with the EMR data and imaging data and other data sets, that's when we can truly become proactive and predictive and make our healthcare systems a lot more effective and efficient. So that's basically has been our mission, and that's what we're trying to achieve at Huma.
Great. Quentin?
Yes. So we focus also on sleep, as Emma mentioned, that sleep disorders is a huge problem in the US. That represents about 100 million people in the US only suffering from insomnia or sleep apnea. And the cost of sleep disorders in the US is about $400 billion per year, which is 2% of the US GDP. That's absolutely huge. And I've been interested in sleep for, well, since the beginning of the company, obviously, but we started a research project in a sleep lab with sleep researchers and sleep doc. And that's where I've found that the tools that was used, or the care pathway in general for the patient, was very complicated. The tool there is a clear underuse of technology in the sleep field, and there was a clear lack of care coordination from screening to diagnosis to treatment, which explains why you've got such a huge number of people suffering from sleep disorders and such a small number of people that are correctly treated in the end. And so the ambition of DREAM is to cross this gap. So we are in the US digital sleep clinic. So we are registered as a clinic in the US. We have our own medical staff, and we merge our technological tool that we build for diagnosis, treatment of insomnia, treatment of sleep apnea in their medical practice to improve the health economic outcomes that we've got on patient and to increase the reach of care. So that's what we do. One of our activities, of course, to diagnose and treat patients. And we also have an activity with pharmaceutical companies and research labs where we take in charge patients in the context of clinical trial to measure their sleep at home, to validate, for example, a drug, or to assess that a drug won't have any side effect on sleep, or to assess the efficacy of a drug. So digital sleep clinic, one for pharmaceutical companies and clinical trials, and one, of course, for diagnosis and treatment.
Fantastic. Let me move on to the topic at hand. All of you have picked clear areas around what to focus on. And as we start to look at self-care technologies, and I'm just going to pivot it out because each of you have come at it from a different aspect on what you've done. But as you know, the topic is these types of self-care technologies. How do you define it? And then how do you really then use these self-care technologies to really craft outcomes? Because that's what's very important for insurers and health systems to know there's positive impact on that. So I'll start with Emma, maybe to mix it up, and then I'll go across the board.
Sure. For me, self-care technology is really, as I've said before, I'm going to repeat myself, but the fact of taking charge of your health, I think it's been emerging for a few years already, but the fact that people want to know, say, it's not now just I will listen to my physician. If I have a problem, I will take what is given. People want to understand how it happens. What's this treatment? I want to know how it will help me. And they want to be enlightened, to have the possibility to make a choice and to understand this choice. So they will really be responsible for their health. I think maybe with the emerging of media and also new technologies, when you have a smartphone and 1,000 mobile applications talking about health, I think that is normal, it's like how it's going. So I think for me, self-care is taking charge And what's important is, and as actors of this field, I think what's important to say is the fact that technology for me should be acting as a guide, as a help, and not to replace something. And we've seen this problem with some people getting addicted. So I think for me that would be this taking charge and getting help in the end to feel better.
No, that's great. Within sleep, which is a critical area of your focus, how do you define self-care specifically in that remit? And then what are some critical outcomes you're looking to collect so that you can then give it to the healthcare or other to say that things are happening?
Well, for what's important in sleep, and the first, at least in France, the first recommendation, this is the clinical recommendation from health authorities, but this is not what we've seen in practice, is sleep hygiene, sleep education, all the things that you can do to improve your sleep and things that you can do yourself with maybe the help of your psychiatrist, for example. And the outcomes that we've been looking at are the subjective outcomes for now with Ergonite mainly. Just to say, if you sleep 4 hours, but if you feel great, you will not be an insomniac. This is how you define insomnia. So what we've seen so far with our product is we've been getting really promising results. So I'm happy to share. We've seen on our pilot clinical study, we've seen decreased insomnia complaints. People were insomniac, and then after using the product, they were not. We've seen longer sleep durations, and we've seen also, this is for me the most promising results, we've seen stable results 5 months after using the product. So this is also for me something that is important. You can take charge, you will see effects, and there will be long term. This will be not like one time, night after one night, and you will be dependent, so you can really get longer effects and no side effects also.
Fantastic. So Quentin, maybe you could talk about the same thing from the sleep perspective. What are your kind of self-care? How do you define self-care tech from that perspective, and what are the outcomes you're trying to drive?
Yeah, so we are not completely a self-care company per se, because we don't provide solution directly to the patient necessarily, but we are really at the crossroad between self-care and virtual care. We bring to the patient the service of a sleep clinic. So from diagnosis, at-home diagnosis, telehealth consultation, treatment of insomnia through cognitive and behavioral therapy, and treatment of sleep apnea with a CPAP or oral appliance. And I think the part that is important in the self-care is about putting the patient in control of his health. And that's also something that we try to do a lot. It's not necessarily having the patient alone, I would say, using solution on itself, but it's having the patient that is a true stakeholder of his care and empowering the patient with meaningful data and allowing the patient to go from one step to the care pathway. So even if we are not a self-care company completely, we embrace a lot the recipe, I would say, from the self-care company, meaning good user experience, good technology that the patient wants to use. We want to make sleep care something that the patient will want to use, and the product that we build, either for diagnosis or for treatment, we try to learn and to have products that people desire in the end. So we try to merge, in a sense, the world of technology, not only meaning deep tech, but also all the UX and beautiful products, and the world of medicine. And that, in this sense, is very close to what people in self-care want to do.
Perfect. I'm going to pivot to my other two stakeholders on a different question. Just on a personal experience, I use Fitbit to measure my sleep. I use Apple Watch. I use heart rate monitors, weight machines. So I'm a quantify me kind of a guy, self-help. And I get data from all these different devices. And Krista and Matt, you've talked about bringing all of this data and really looking at this. As you start to look at each of these different data sets, we see that there's high variability and it differs from a person to person. So I'll ask Matt first. How do you deal with this high variability? Or as you start to bring in each of the what we call data sets from each of these devices, how do you normalize it? How do you make it sense for these outcomes, which then healthcare and insurers can use in the future?
That's a really good question, and you're absolutely right. There's a lot of variability, but the context that we utilize these tools is very much around remote patient monitoring. So we provide our technology to healthcare systems, to clinical teams who are making clinical decisions based on this information, right? So when we deploy our solution and we're relying on data coming these types of devices and sensors, especially in a clinical setting, it is of utmost importance that we use devices that are approved by regulatory bodies and are clinically validated and CE marked and clinical grade devices. So whenever we integrate with any type of sensor or device to monitor any patients, whether these are diabetic patients, COVID patients, or cardiac patients, we tend to go for medical grade blood pressure cuffs and weighing scales and so on. Now, when you're looking at the data that's coming from wearables like Fitbits and Apple Watch and Garmin's and so on, and in that scenario, absolutely, there's variability, right? And we tend to use that data to develop digital biomarkers, right? Sort of hidden signatures that can tell us something about the disease process, whether that's around risk and susceptibility, whether that's that we're developing a diagnostic tool, or whether we're utilizing that data to better understand the progression of a condition so we can monitor it easily. So in that scenario, there is variability and there's noise in the data. So we absolutely have to clean, structure that data, and we actually apply specific algorithms that can differentiate noise from meaningful data, right? Especially when it comes to things like continuous heart rate data, continuous activity data coming from these sensors. So that's the kind of analysis and cleaning that we have to undertake before taking any meaningful insights out of that data.
Krista, do you want to comment on this? How do you bring in these types of different devices? I know you're building an infrastructure for data aggregation, and how do you make it impactful such that we could then use that for measures to the healthcare and others that things wellness and other health related stuff is improving? Over to you, Krista.
Yeah, absolutely, Shri. One of our core values here at Patienttory as a self-care technology is the need to embrace data. I mentioned earlier in my intro that we see data as that foundational layer of that health industry, and we've already entered into the early stages of data capture and analysis with current self-care technologies that are on the market, like your Fitbit, Apple Watch, weight machines. And we can already see a shift in behavior needed to reinforce self-care technologies as a way of life and user engagement to quantify results for care improvement. As a result, by having all of this information in one place, we can start to see more deeper the correlation, which can eventually lead to causation and prevention, right? So having, the ability to start to create the advanced analytics needed to really capture that 360 picture of the patient does not exist today. So definitely, for us, it's more technical because it's the use of APIs, it's the use of security. to be able to have that data at rest. But it is definitely going to be based on the level and the maturity of analysis that we can actually take from that, and really seeing a 360 view of the patient and correlating not only their medical records, but also their day-to-day wellness with their current state of health.
Yeah, no, that brings me to another question, and this goes back to self-care, and this is for all panelists. We assume that everybody does the right thing. We all know that if wellness is tied to outcomes like insurance, and insurance is using it, then people do different behaviors, like putting the Fitbit in a washing machine so that you can get the steps to see you're fine, or you're doing other things with technology which can spoof it to get the intended results for that particular outcome and biomarker. So I'm going to ask, we all talked about the positive, that everybody is doing it right and you get the 360-degree view of the data, which is fantastic. What about bad actors? What do we do to detect them and things? And maybe I'll start with you, Chris, because of what you talked about, and then it'll go around. What do you think of that?
Yeah, and part of that, and reason why out of all the technologies, our company decided to use blockchain was the sense of security and immutability, and the ability not to, and have that transparency as to who's accessing that information. Another part of that is also identity and management. It's now down to the individual to own that, and to own that information and be able to give custodianship or access to some part of their records with whomever that they want to. And by having this security layer with blockchain can help to also secure the different types of information that comes into the system.
Okay. Why don't I ask Emma, how do you protect against bad actors because of how this ties to actually clinical outcomes or others? And how do you, the positive is that you're getting good data. What if the data is, need to be verified?
Actually, I've not had this kind of, since we're not really monitoring day to day, I've not had this experience really.
Okay, not an issue. Matt?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, you really have to look at self-care in two different categories, right? You have self-care in the setting of, patients, those with conditions, right? Which is kind of, what we focus on. And in that scenario, we provide the technologies and the wearables and the devices. These are we provide that to the clinical teams, right? And the doctors are the ones actually prescribing the solution, the technology to the patients. So there is that incentive that is created, that and that responsibility from the patient, knowing that their clinical team is watching them and monitoring them over them, and the ultimate goal there is to help that patient live longer, fuller lives with good quality, right? So there will always be bad actors, but what's the point of lying to your clinician, right? But then there's that whole other side, which is about those healthy individuals, right? Those healthy individuals who may be at risk. And I'm a cardiologist by background, right? So the one of the first thing that comes to my mind is in primary prevention, right? And we all know that we should exercise more and smoke less, and lose weight, and we all know the risk factors. But when you're trying to tackle that, and it's such a long-term thing, it's very difficult to induce that behavior change. So and if it's all tied to some premium or insurance policy, if you do this many steps, we will give you this price on. These are then you will always get bad actors there, and it will be difficult to identify them. But at the end of the day, we should really be trying to enable those individuals to take charge of their own health, and to really provide them with a personalized trajectory of, you know, what could happen to them, what is the consequence of, you know, doing only 2,000 steps a day, and, you know, eating unhealthy and smoking this much. And if you can kind of personalize that and enable them to visualize that trajectory, I think you can engage them and enable that behavior change. But yeah, difficult to tackle the bad actors in that scenario.
And Quentin, didn't want to miss you out on this topic.
Yeah, thank you. I'm not sure I would talk about bad actors, really. I think the challenge is to make patients change their behavior or have a behavior that is more healthy. And in this context, that's the job of behavioral science and good user experience to change the patient behavior. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And the more you adapt, the more you personalize your content, the more you add also human coaching, not only digital coaching, the more you can succeed to change the behaviors of somebody and drive it toward better behavior. For the patients that cheat on their device to show a certain number of steps, that's not something that I'm very familiar to be honest. And but in our case, for example, what we sell to payers is health economic outcomes. So we don't necessarily say if the patient does that, then it will be in better health, but we say, look at the patients that we have in our care pathway and using our services. In the end, they have their insomnia treated. They've got a better compliance with their CPAP treatment at 3 months, at 12 months, etc. And these data are some data that the payers can also see on his own population, and that's where, for me, is the value of what we do. And when we work with payers, we want to have some in the ideal scenario, we have also an actuary that can look at the data from the payers, look at our data, and then show to the payer the savings that he make, which is data that we can use afterwards to convince other players. So yeah, in a word, I wouldn't necessarily talk about focus on the bad actors and the behaviors, but more focus on the health economic outcomes and on the well, to say it otherwise, I think a policy that says if you make this number of steps, you would get some money is not necessarily a good one, but it's good to pay a player based on his outcome and not necessarily on the behavior of the patient.
No, that's a very fair statement. I definitely concur with that. Just as we move this thing forward, and again, you know, we talked about several critical wellness measures. So now let me talk about, what do you think are barriers in rolling out wellness programs? I think today all of you have had, and Matt was very appropriate. He said there's two segments. There's the segment of curation or solving a problem where you have much more motivated patients and different. But in wellness measures, it's the healthy population, and you know, there it's all about preventive behavior. So maybe I'd like to go around and ask each of you, what are some of that? How do you roll out a wellness program, these types of preventive behaviors? And is there a variability depending on the segment of the population? How do you, is it one size fits all? Is it variable? And maybe I'll start with Emma and then move on. Emma, your thoughts on, you know, what do you think are barriers in rolling out a wellness program? And if so, how do we go about doing it?
I think one of the barriers is for the healthcare professional, as for industrials, is to be able to adapt your discourse. So if you have one healthy person and one person that had this disease, they will not have the same needs, but they can maybe benefit from the same program or from the same device. So I think it's important that to really educate, to be able to educate different segments of people, of individuals. And so we could provide, I think our role is to provide mainly education, so that everyone can act as its own self-care, but in an enlightened way. So you can, make your choice, but I know what I'm doing because I have been told the most. I think that's important.
Your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I believe one of the biggest challenges we face today is essentially the lack of education and awareness needed to really gain the adoption. And in part of that also is the incentivization piece. So how are we incentivizing, users to use self-care technologies to actually, see these outcomes and get these outcomes, commonplace in today's society.
Great. Quentin?
Yeah, that's a great question, actually. And I like the fact that you divide the population between the medical part and the more like general population. In the case of sleep, interestingly, the frontier between insomnia and bad sleep, so medical and consumer, is quite thin. And we do both, actually. When we work with a payer, we've got one part where we are the clinic, and so when a patient is ill, comes to our clinic digitally, and one part where we offer a general sleep improvement program on their covered population. And to have a wellness program that performs well, you have to understand that you compete with everything that would drag the attention of the patient. So basically, you compete with Instagram, YouTube, or Netflix, and you need to make your program interesting or attractive for the patient. So he will go to it, he will be interested, he will change his behavior. So you need to gamify it to reward the patient. And that's where I think you see these companies, again, merging strong medical basis and the tech world. And that's a lot where digital health can perform to build some healthcare program that the patient desire, that the patient want to do. And for me, that's the key of adoption of digital health for the patient. But that's actually also true for the more like medical part. If you want a patient to, you don't need to make something ugly, I would say, or too medical or too boring to be efficient. And so what you do to have a good wellness program is actually the same thing that you do to have a more good medical experience, and both of them needs to be patient-centric.
Perfect. Matt?
I think in terms of what we do, in the context of remote patient monitoring, I also see that as self-care, right? It's essentially, although it's monitoring by the clinician, if you can provide the patients with the tools that can help them better navigate their condition, telling them, what to do, when to do it, how to do it, really educating them. And we all know an empowered patient will have better outcomes. When a patient comes into your office and, ready for that change, ready to engage, understands their condition, the outcomes will be better. And we've been seeing that across the board. We've rolled out national virtual wards for COVID-19 patients, and where we were seeing 93-94% adherence rates, reductions in readmissions, increases in the hospital capacity. So we were seeing positive changes all around. Same goes for our type 2 diabetes deployments, significant reduction in weight, significant reduction in HbA1c levels. But this is all coming back to kind of education and empowerment. But when we're talking about self-care in the context of prevention and wellness, I think one of the key challenges that we have today is that, okay, we rolled out a program, let's say, direct to consumers. How do we measure success, right? What are our KPIs? And I think one of the really important things in that scenario is to make sure that you have the right bodies that are bought into the mission, right? You know, you have if you have the let's say you're rolling out a wellness program around cardiac health, you know, then let's get the AHA involved, let's get the ACC involved, right? Let's make sure that all the HCPs are bought into this, and whatever wellness program we're rolling out, we're able to measure outcomes and provide that information back to the clinicians, so they know that this wellness program is actually working, so they'll be more comfortable referring those individuals to these programs. And absolutely what Quentin said, you know, making sure that these are not just, you know, especially in the prevention side, not purely sort of medical focus, but there's an element of, you know, delightful experiences that we can deliver with these solutions that will really engage these individuals. I think that's absolutely key.
Thank you. We're down on the home stretch. I have two big questions. One is kind of the immediate ones around learnings and success factors. and I'd like to each of you to spend a minute on your key learnings and success factors, which we can leave behind to our audience. And then I have a futuristic question around where do you see innovation trending. So the first question, you know, Krista, why don't I ask your thing? What are some key learnings and success factors for these programs? And what would you recommend to the audience? What are one or two key takeaways?
Absolutely. What we found to date is, of course, you know, being able to measure improvement in cares as a long-term one. A lot of short-term successes that we've been able to measure, I mentioned earlier, one of those has been engagement. So we see as, you know, if we're able to really have engagement high on our platform, that means, you know, we're motivating our users to want to take better care of themselves, which is eventually going to be rolled out into that adoption, that mass adoption of self-management interventions for prevention and care that can also be, you know, adopted in other areas such as an employer setting, or be reimbursed, we mentioned earlier, by insurers. One thing that, you know, we think long-term that would help us, you know, get to that critical mass is establishing a self-care as a global policy priority to improve health outcomes, especially as it relates to addressing the sustainability of health systems, you know, around the world. So again, going back into that incentivization piece for those users.
Thank you. Quentin?
Yeah, I think our two main takeaways, I would say, well, they are pretty obvious, but the first one is to always start with a medical need and be sure that you talk to the doctors, key opinion leaders in the field, and that your product and solution will answer a real need. Also talk to payers as well to understand their needs. And really the medical knowledge is on their side. And so I think it's first like design something with key opinion leaders and design a solution that answers a medical need. And then after that, that's rapid and iterative cycles, data-driven cycles to improve the product and to improve the patient experience over time. And I think that, well, that's the approach that we have on SIP. That's the approach that other players in the virtual care or digital health space have. And I think that's how you achieve good health economics outcomes. So that would be the two takeaways of working in the virtual care field.
Yeah, great. Emma?
So I agree with Quentin on that one. I will add more general public experience that I have is this iteration between providing something that has been developed with experts, medical experts, provide clinical evidence, and also to get some, if it's possible, getting feedbacks from the users of the patients directly to improve motivation, the compliance, for example. I think that's an important point. It's not always possible, But I think when it's possible, it's really crucial.
Great. Matt?
Yeah, agree with what everybody has said here. But I guess, you know, in addition to that, you know, one of the I think key reasons why you know, we've seen such great adherence on our solutions is simplicity, right? I think keeping things simple is really important, and with that in mind, you know, we making sure that all the products and digital technologies are developed with the in that sort of user-centric, you know, element included, right? Making sure that we're talking to the patients, you know, whichever whatever the intended use is, whichever cohort we're going to launch this in. You know, if we have a solution for, you know, for Parkinson's disease, right, and we're developing a technology that is based on Parkinson's disease, but, you know, these patients have tremors, they can't even type anything, right? So making sure that whatever we're developing and designing is fit for purpose and is simple to use for the individuals is absolutely key. And I think one of the things that we haven't really spoken about much today is accessibility, right? Because especially when we're talking about these types of self-care technologies and wellness programs, you know, one of the major populations that need these sort of technologies is the underserved populations, right? Who may not be able to you know, afford a Fitbit or an Apple Watch, and, you know, so making sure that, you know, all these solutions are as accessible as possible, and making sure that we are inclusive of all populations, and that's absolutely critical in my opinion.
No, fantastic set of key takeaways, from accessibility to making it easy to making sure that it's you know, simple to use and engagement specific. Some great insights. So I'm going to ask you to put the crystal ball on and give me one suggested innovation or next wave in your individual products. So think about your product and say, what's the next best thing you're going to do? Emma, why don't I start with you?
What is the next best thing we're going to do for sleep health?
Yes.
I think what would be really, really interesting is finding biomarkers of sleep troubles that will lead to personalized medicine.
Great. Quentin?
Well, in our case, that's more about scaling what we do. I think a lot of people still have sleep disorders, and we want to be able to reach as many as possible.
Great. Matt?
Yeah, I think absolutely, as Quentin said, scaling is very, very important, because the more we scale, the more data we have, the more insights we can generate, the more markers we can generate, and at the end of the day, that's what's going to drive proactive predictive care. So that's absolutely essential. And again, going back to what Emma said, you know, today, you know, on our platforms, whether it's for clinical trials or remote patient monitoring, you know, the way we triage patients is very much at a cohort level, right? You know, you take a heart failure population or a COVID population, and then you sit down with the clinical teams and say, okay, you know, this is, if the oxygen saturation is drop below this, then, you know, I want an alert, or, you know, if the blood pressure goes above that. But, you know, how can we leverage the data, leverage the sensors, leverage individuals' daily activities to develop personalized baselines for individuals, and look at deviations from that to be more personalized around triaging, making sure we're attending to the right patient at the right time. So I think personalization is very much the way forward.
And that's it. Krista?
Yeah, I would say scaling and growth in the form of adoption. of our token reward system that's automated on our application, being able to really appeal to a larger number of potential patients that would use us for gain and access or rewards to, different nutrition and fitness programs that would help to bring these different populations onto the system.
No, all all fantastic examples, and I think we're at the home stretch. And before I summarize, any particular points we didn't discuss, and so I'm going to open it up in free form to all of you. Any particular things, as you brought up, Matt, on accessibility, but have we missed out any particular nuance of this topic which you may want to, maybe a quick fire round each one. I'll start with Quinton. Anything we missed or anything you wanted to cover today?
Well, that's a tough one. Well, I think it was good. I think one important insight, we might tend to believe that payers usually don't want to implement virtual care because they don't know what it is, etc., etc. We are part of a group that mix payers and digital health companies to see how care is going to be reshaped after COVID. And one very interesting point from this discussion, we see that payers want to implement virtual care as much as digital health company want, but they've got a lot of good reasons and good barriers not to do it. So I would say one takeaway to make payers adopt virtual care is talk as soon as possible with some payers to understand their needs and to see how we can together overcome these barriers. That be it for me.
Emma, Krista, anything? Emma?
For me, maybe the fact that all these emerging real-life monitoring possibilities could be a really good help for health systems and payers to really get a look at what's really going on, maybe.
Yeah, I would say.
Promising.
Go ahead, Krista.
Yeah, I would totally agree with Emma. And just in talking with payers and systems, I know one of the biggest challenges is just keeping those users engaged. So I'd say moving forward and building, self-care technologies as we advance on trying to improve health is just to remember like a small feature, that patient engagement and the ability to, set reminders, but also personalize to that individual is going to be important.
Great. Matt?
Yeah. Final messages. I suppose, where do I begin? I guess one of the important final messages is, what we have seen over the last 2 years, right? 3 years, and we've been as HUMA, we've been at this for a long time, right? And I've also experienced it as a clinician. Clinicians are busy people, right? They have a lot to do. They have to deal with the 10 different systems that they have in the hospital. So when you come to them and say, hey, here's another technology, another device, another set of data that you need to monitor, the initial reaction is always, I don't want that, right? And that's why the adoption has been very, very difficult pre-COVID. Now then COVID happened, and all of a sudden, everybody wants these types of solutions and technologies. But I think one of the best things that the governments can do right now, and this is already happening in some shape or form in the United States with the reimbursement codes for these types of remote monitoring technologies. It's happening in Germany, and we're based in the UK. So again, we have our national healthcare system, so there are no payers there. So there's, again, the government is incentivized to improve outcomes and utilize these technologies. So I think making sure that the clinical teams, the healthcare professionals are reimbursed for utilizing these technologies as much as possible to maximize adoption is going to be, again, absolutely critical going forward.
Oh, fantastic. We're on time. So thank you again, each and every one of you, for such an insightful discussion. We started with two cohorts, the clinical and the wellness population. We then explored a little bit around what would drive this type of self-care and self-care technologies. You guys were very, articulate around how do we not alone enable this. It's all about behavior. It's about engagement. It's about education. It's about trying to take them through the journey to get there. You focused on the future, really taking this thing further. And again, you emphasized on accessibility, as Matt said, and again, reinforcing more, getting it upfront from an engagement standpoint. And then last but not the least, how do you articulate the value back to the payers? How do you articulate the value in this new norm of how remote engagement comes together? So thank you again for a wonderful discussion. And I think we've just scratched the surface. I think we could definitely go on for many more hours. And I really wish each and every one of your companies the very best, and really appreciate that. Before we break, let's see the results of our poll. Hoping there you go. So what is the most promising new medical advance? Definitely the big winner, 58%, is patient-friendly digital biosensor platforms. Whoa, for our group, I think we hit where the future is going. But I think I would say that the rest of them are also very critical, whether it's effective CAR T and personalized medicine, or comprehensive diagnostics, or solving some of these big problems around blood-brain barriers, or accessible vaccines. I would say definitely digital engagement is here to stay. And as all of you, what you brought up, which is very true, is digital is not by itself, it's a means to an end. It is what will enable all of those new medical advances in the other four categories. And so having digital complementing with each of those would lead to better medicine and better solutions. But again, thank you everybody, and really appreciate all of you for your wonderful comments and suggestions and feedback. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.